The prison where silence breathes. They say that silence is weight, that it can settle on your shoulders like iron. But here, inside the walls of ADX Florence, silence doesn't just weigh on you, it entombs you. This is the most secure prison in America, the place built to contain men the government fears more than anyone else alive. No gangs, no allies, no whispers of rebellion. Here, you have nothing but concrete, steel, and your own mind slowly chewing itself apart. 23 hours a day, the men in ADX Florence live inside a concrete box no bigger than a parking space, 7 feet by 12 feet, sealed behind steel and reinforced glass. One slit of a window 4 inches wide, angled toward the sky so you don't know where you are or what time it is. You don't see fences or watchtowers or even another human face. You see sky, nothing more, like staring through a crack in your own coffin. No talking ever, no voices drifting down the tier, no footsteps approaching your door except the predictable shuffle of guards on rounds. Even the vents and pipes are engineered to swallow sound. In most prisons, noise is life. Arguments, laughter, banging doors, chaos. But here, noise is the enemy. Because noise means communication. And communication means control slipping. ADX wasn't built to punish the body. It was built to fracture the mind. But the Bureau of Prisons underestimated one thing. Silence is something humans were never built to survive. And when you take away voices, people will invent new ones. So men in this concrete labyrinth did what humans have always done under pressure. They adapted. They created a hidden language. A whisper behind the silence. A code carved out of desperation and time. Not spoken with the mouth. That's forbidden. Spoken through steel. Through pipes. Through walls. Through taps. Each prisoner locked away like a sealed secret, yet somehow building invisible bridges between their cells. Not friendships in the normal sense. Not conversations for pleasure, but survival. Because in ADX, the worst punishment isn't the isolation. It's realizing that your mind is the only voice left, and it never stops talking back. Imagine the routine. You wake up to nothing. No sound. No movement. Just your own breath echoing in a cell built to destroy you one silent minute at a time. You pace. You count bricks. You trace lines in the air for repetition, for structure, for sanity. Then one day, days, weeks, months into the silence, you hear it. A tap. Just one. Faint, like a raindrop that somehow fell inside concrete walls that haven't seen weather in decades. Then another. Then a rhythm. And suddenly this tomb breathes. In the pit of isolation, that tap is oxygen. A reminder. You are not alone. Someone else remembers you exist. No guard knows. No officer hears. But somewhere through the wall is another soul refusing to disappear into silence. The code begins slowly. Learning it costs time, years sometimes. You listen. You memorize. You answer. You become fluent in a language no one could speak aloud. Tap once, listen. Tap twice. Hold your breath. Tap 3 times. Hope nobody reports you. It's illegal in here to be human. Illegal to belong. Illegal to connect. But men who have lost everything cling to the last thing left. Communication. Not for power, not for rebellion, but to keep the mind from folding in on itself. And here's the truth nobody outside these walls ever really thinks about. In a place designed to erase you, hearing another human being, even through steel and plumbing, can be the difference between sanity and becoming a ghost who still breathes. In a quiet heart of ADX Florence, the most dangerous thing a prisoner can do is speak. And the most dangerous thing the prison fears is that someone might hear them. This is the story of how they do it anyway. This is the story of the hidden voices of ADX. The secret language of steel and knuckles. In prisons across America, men pass information with shouts, hand signs, contraband phones, and whispered threats. But ADX Florence isn't like any other prison. Here, sound is the enemy. Walls are thick. Doors seal like vaults. Even the air vents are designed to choke noise before it travels. Yet, inside this engineered silence, a language thrives. It doesn't use tongues or breath. It uses knuckles, fingertips, metal, and patience. A conversation here sounds like nothing to an outsider. A faint tick on the concrete, like someone tapping a pen on a desk miles away. But to the men inside, those tiny sounds mean everything. The tap code. Morse for the forgotten. It starts with an old war prisoner's invention. The tap code, born in POW camps where speaking meant death. A 5x5 grid of letters. No alphabet, no voices, just tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Letter. Tap, 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 tap. Another letter. Slow. Painful. But communication here isn't measured by speed. It's measured by sanity. One inmate once said, through taps, silence makes you talk to ghosts. Tapping reminds you you're alive. In ADX, every inmate becomes a student of patience. A single sentence can take minutes. A full conversation can take hours. But what else do you have when time is no longer a river, but an ocean you're drowning in? The Pipe Whisper Network. Not all conversations are taps. Some travel through plumbing. Old steel pipes vibrate like guitar strings. A toothpick, a shard of paper, even a plastic fork tine pressed to the pipe turns vibration into strategy. A hum, a flick, a single pulse. It's primitive, genius, forbidden. You press your ear against the cold steel. You wait. You listen. The pipes talk, echoes bouncing through a labyrinth of concrete guts. Thrum pause. A greeting. Short pulse, long pause, rapid triple. Information, encrypted by rhythm. Guards hear plumbing. Prisoners hear survival. The wall is a diary. Scratching is communication too, but slower. The long memory of ADX. Microscopic marks dug with fingernails, staples, or, for the truly patient, the edge of a plastic spoon. A map of who lived here before. Dates scratched into concrete, like counting a war that never ends. Sometimes a single phrase, hidden beneath dust and paint. Don't forget your name. Men don't scratch to rebel. They scratch so they don't disappear. Notes the guards never see. Paper is contraband here, if used wrong. Writing can get you cuffed, stripped, shipped to the range, the silent punishment wing beyond silence. So prisoners improvise. Messages written in toothpaste behind metal plates. Words carved with soap into the underside of bunks. Slips hidden in the food slot hinge. Toilet tissue folded like origami puzzles only insiders can decode. Letters dissolved into powder, then rehydrated days later by the receiver. Communication here is as dangerous as a weapon. Because in ADX, connection is contraband. This isn't brotherhood. It's survival. Outside, people imagine prison talk as gang codes and criminal strategy. Inside ADX, sometimes the message is as simple as, "You still there?" Yeah. 2 words. Earned by risk. In a world built to erase sound, the faintest reply can feel like a lifeline. They're not building empires. They're building sanity one tap at a time. Some conversations are just stories of the outside. Some are memories. Some are prayers. Most are just humanity, traded secretly like cigarettes once were. They can lock a body in solitary. They can bury a man in concrete. They can strip him of light, space, voice. But they cannot stop the basic human instinct to speak and be heard. Even if the only listener is another soul, feeling the same silence gnaw at them from the other side of steel. And once the language of taps begins, a rebellion quietly forms. Not against guards or fences, but against disappearing. The guards who hear everything and nothing. In ADX Florence, silence isn't just policy. It's doctrine. A religion of order built on the belief that sound is danger. The inmates tap, whisper through steel veins, scratch meaning into concrete like archaeologists of desperation. But don't think for a second the prison doesn't hear them. ADX guard are trained not to watch men, but to listen for ghosts. The quiet patrol. Every shift, boots move down the tier at a steady rhythm. No shouting, no idle talk, just eyes scanning, ears tuned to the smallest vibration. A tick on concrete, they pause. A faint hum inside plumbing, they lean in. At ADX, the difference between an inmate tapping a code and an inmate crafting a weapon can be the difference between life and death. So guards listen with a predator's patience. One officer once said, "You don't listen for noise here. You listen for what breaks the silence." War on communication. In traditional prisons, guards fight contraband phones, notes, signals through vents. Here, the war is microscopic. Sudden silence after a tap. Suspicion. A torn piece of tissue. Interrogation. 2 meals passed untouched. Monitoring. Someone's waiting to signal. Even talking to guards is a tactic. Some inmates speak only in generic phrases, saving real words for taps. Others smile, overly polite, because silence teaches manipulation too. A kind tone might earn extra seconds of the food slot. And in those seconds, a whisper can pass like smoke through a crack. So guards watch lips, as much as they watch hands. The listening room. Deep in the facility, there's a small room no inmate ever sees. Banks of screens. Sophoma monitors. Observation logs recording nothing and everything. Audio sensors, subtle, buried in walls like nerves. Not microphones. Those could be jammed or tricked. Instead, vibration readers. This place doesn't listen for words. It listens for patterns. And if they detect a sequence, tap pause, tap tap, tap 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 pause. A silent alarm goes off. A guard walks the tier. Change shift. Door sweep. The quiet war resets. Punishment through silence. When the guards win, communication collapses. Punishment here isn't cuffs or beatings. It's removal of possibility. Recreation? Gone. Books? Removed. Mattress? Pulled at 5 a.m. Lights? Left on. Cell moved to deeper isolation. The harshest penalty? A unit known simply as Range 13. You don't go there for violence. You go there for defiance. 5 inches of window becomes 2. Silence becomes an abyss. And every sound you once had, every whisper through copper pipes, is severed. Inmates call it the burial wing. No taps. No echoes. Just the sound of your own blood moving behind your ears. The psychological chess match. Guards don't yell here. They don't posture. They wait. Because control at ADX isn't physical. It's psychological gravity. The prison pulls you inward. Toward stillness. Toward obedience. Most men break, not for violence, but from the weight of nothing. And guards? They become sculptors of silence. They don't crush rebellion by shouting. They suffocate it by being still longer than you can breathe. Some inmates come here thinking they're warriors. Street kings. Shot callers. Lion hearts. But the guards of ADX fight a different war. One fought in whispers and footsteps and vibrations through steel. And in this war, the rule is simple. The first man to need noise loses. When silence becomes strategy, silence breaks a weak mind. But to a certain type of man, a man who refuses to disappear, silence becomes strategy. And inside ADX Florence, silence didn't suffocate everyone. For some, the isolation sharpened something primal. Cunning. Patience. A slow-burning hunger to not just survive, but adapt. Communication here didn't just continue. It evolved. And what began as taps on concrete grew into a system, a covert, layered intelligence network, woven through steel and paranoia. Because if ADX was built to erase voices, then the inmates learned to speak without sound at all. The brotherhood of the invisible line. It didn't start as friendship. There are no friendships in ADX. Only alliances born from necessity. One inmate learns the tap code. Another learns pipe vibration. A third figures out guard rotation patterns. Knowledge becomes currency. Silence becomes discipline. And patience becomes the deadliest weapon of all. This wasn't gang loyalty. This wasn't brotherhood. It was the fellowship of survival. They were never in the same room. Never spoke aloud. Never shared a look. But they built trust, without ever seeing each other's faces. Imagine that. An underground network formed not through violence, but quiet devotion to staying human. The signal system. The first evolution came through observation. A scratch on a doorframe equals. Guard shift change in 30. A folded corner on a meal tray napkin equals. Listening devices active. A tiny smear of toothpaste on the underside of a slot equals. Someone new arrived. And he's talking. Even silence became a message. If the tap stopped, if the pipes fell quiet, if days passed with no subtle rhythms, it meant someone had been moved, punished, or broken. You don't need to speak to send a message like that. Pain echoes louder than sound. The ghost facts. In the early years, before the guards perfected their silence, a technique spread, quietly, carefully, writing letters in water. A damp fingertip. Traced words on concrete. It dried invisible. Later, another inmate breathed on the wall, and the message reappeared. In faint, ghost-white script for seconds. Just long enough to read it. Just short enough to vanish. They called it ghost faxing. No ink. No paper. nothing to confiscate, except the memory of the message. The Bureau never expected the greatest security risk will be condensation and patience. Silent couriers. Every prison has runners. ADX has ghost runners. Not men. Objects. A tear of plastic from packaging. A tiny rolled paper hidden in the seam of a laundry bag. A speck of foil pressed into the thread of a mop handle. Passed from cell to cell. Not by hand, but by routine. Laundry. Trash. Meal trays. Commissary bags. Every item is a potential messenger. Every mundane prison task becomes a supply chain of meaning. Guards see procedure. Inmates see a battlefield of opportunity. One inmate once wrote, through taps, anything that moves, speaks. In ADX, even motion is language. A system that should not exist. These men had no voice, no sight of each other, no tools, no devices, no right to connection. By design, they were buried alive. And yet, they built a network through vibration, timing, patience, crumbs of material, breath and condensation, rhythm and memory. A communication web born not of technology, but human refusal to disappear. ADX was built to break the body. Instead, it forged minds capable of seeing opportunity. In dust, pipes, footsteps, and silence. It turned convicts into tacticians, isolated men into quiet conspirators, and silence into a language so sophisticated that even the architects of the prison cannot fully decode it. Because when you take every tool from a man, every freedom, every voice, every sense, the mind becomes the last weapon. And inside those concrete tombs, some minds sharpened into blades, invisible, wordless, deadly patient, and somehow still human, ears in the walls. Inside ADX Florence, silence is not quiet. It breathes, it hums, it crawls under the skin, and in that silence, men become predators for sound, listening not with ears, but with nerves, memory, instinct. Because in a world where words are banned, noise becomes evidence. Every footstep is a warning. Every echo is a threat. Every cough could mean punishment. So, the prisoners learn the art of hearing without being caught hearing. It begins at night, always at night, when the prison seems still, but tension drips like water from a leaking pipe. A bunk creaks 3 cells down. A guard's boots drag. Long, slow, like he's tired or pretending he's tired. Metal keys whisper against a belt. Then a faint vibration in the wall. Tap, pause, tap, tap. Barely a flicker of sound. But to them, it's a sentence. A lifeline. A secret handshake in the dark. One man presses his ear to the vent. Another sits cross-legged on the floor, fingertips ready against concrete. And someone else, maybe a killer, maybe a ghost of who he once was, waits by his toilet bowl, water drained, chin resting on cold stainless steel. A mutilated communication line. Primitive, fragile, and sacred. This is their truth. You don't survive ADX by fighting. You survive by listening. The guards know. Of course they do. They walk with the arrogance of men who control the locks, the doors, the food, the air you breathe. And yet, they're paranoid too. Because silence is power. And silence they didn't create, that terrifies them. A young officer, new, nervous, voice too small for the badge on his chest, once said, "This place listens to itself." He meant as a joke. Nobody laughed. Even the staff can feel it. This invisible current running through concrete veins. Something alive in the walls. Not voices, but presence. They try to stamp it out. Random cell searches. Ear pressed to steel. Flashlights cutting through tiny windows. Keep it down. Eyes front. You don't talk unless spoken to. As if anyone here is begging for conversation. No, this isn't idle chatter. This is survival code. Because silence in ADX Florence isn't just punishment. It's designed to erase identity, to turn men into shadows, to make them forget the cadence of another human voice. So the inmates fight back, not with fists, but with whispers of sound no one else should hear. There's a moment, brief, nearly invisible, where the whole prison shifts at once. A guard gate slams on range 13. Someone flushes twice, signal for stop talking. A cough answers on range 8, confirmation. Then, silence again, but a loaded silence. A silence alive with hidden meaning. This is not conversation. This is rebellion. In its smallest, most dangerous form. They aren't exchanging gossip. They're exchanging proof they still exist. One man said it like this: "In here, a single sound can save your sanity. Not because of what it says, but because it means someone else is still breathing." Think about that. Communication, not for information, but for connection. These aren't saints. Many did unforgivable things. Some are in this place. Some maybe didn't. But punishment isn't just steel and stone here. It's isolation sharpened into a weapon. So they adapt. A scrape of metal on metal meaning, I hear you. A single pipe tap meaning stay alive. A quiet rhythm on the bed frame, barely audible, meaning you're not alone. In a prison where words are forbidden, hearing becomes rebellion. Survival becomes sound. And silence. Silence is death wearing headphones. When the lights cut at 11 p.m., the world outside forgets them. But inside these walls, in the cold, dark, echoing through steel bones and cement lungs, a prisoner presses his hand against the concrete, waiting for a vibration that may never come. Not for gossip, not for escape plans, but for humanity. He waits, and waits. And when the faintest tremor finally hums through the wall, barely a heartbeat, barely a breath, he closes his eyes. Not smiling, not relieved, just present. Because even inside the most silent prison in America, the human soul refuses to die quietly. In ADX Florence, survival isn't spoken. It's heard. Paper, sweat, and blood, the notes smugglers. In a place where words are outlawed, a single scrap of paper becomes more dangerous than a blade. Steel doors slam. Electronic locks hum. Cameras blink red like unblinking eyes. ADX Florence was designed to make communication impossible. No handshakes. No whispers. No passing contraband. Cells sealed tight. Movement monitored. Hands shackled. Heads down, eyes forward. And still paper moves. Messages travel. Secrets breathe. Because even in the harshest prison on Earth, humans don't just need food, water, and air. They need to be heard. It starts with materials that shouldn't matter. A sliver torn from a legal form. A shaving of cardboard from a meal tray sleeve. A fragment peeled from the back of a food label. Paper so thin the ink bleeds through. Paper so precious it's handled like gold. Then comes the writing. Tiny, cramped, desperate script. No pens allowed. So they improvise. Burnt staple shavings rubbed into dust to make charcoal. Plastic melted into a crude stylus. Even a fingernail dipped in instant coffee to stain words into fibers. You don't write boldly here. You write small, like you're whispering with ink. Sentences curled like secret prayers. Names hidden in code. Coordinates that lead nowhere and everywhere at once. The notes don't read like letters. They read like lifelines. Still here. You breathing. Don't break. We survive. One day at a time. Not poetry. Not philosophy. Just proof of existence. Moving a note is an art form. And a war tactic. A flush at the wrong second. A guard glance too long. A camera whir. And it's over. Strip cell. Property seized. Privileges gone. Weeks, sometimes months, added to isolation logs. So they plan like soldiers. They move like ghosts. A scrap hidden in the spine of a Bible. A message folded inside toothpaste foil. A note rolled into plastic and slid under the sleeve of a meal tray. Even when desperation swallows fear, tucked into the seam of a jumpsuit cuff, and carried through a metal detector beating like a second heart. Paper becomes a heartbeat. Ink becomes blood. And then, the passing. Two men on recreation, alone, in cages separated by steel mesh thick as war armor. They act like strangers. Faces empty. Eyes dead. The guard yawns. Turns his head. Only a second. One man coughs. A signal. A fingertip flicks. A tiny white speck sails through the air, so small it looks like dust. It lands between the cages, brushing concrete. And then time stops. A boot shifts. A chain rattles. A baton taps metal impatiently. The second prisoner drops to his knees for push-ups. Hand covers the speck. Palm sweat. Heart slams. Fingers fold like prayer and bring it up sleeve. He returns to the floor. Slow, obedient, silent. Message delivered. Soul intact. A war won in half a breath. And somewhere, in the dead quiet of a concrete tomb, A man unfolds that paper with trembling fingers. He doesn't read it quickly. He savors it like contraband oxygen. Because on that paper are not just words. They are rebellion, memory, humanity, refusing to drown. The message might be mundane. It might simply say, "You matter," or "I remember you." But in ADX, that might be the most dangerous sentence of all. The guards search. Always. They know paper moves. They know men talk without talking. One veteran CO once muttered, "You could take away light. You could take away sound. But you can't kill hope. It sneaks." He wasn't wrong. Hope isn't loud here. It doesn't roar or march or break chains. It whispers. It hides in the crease of a folded scrap. It travels in silence, thin as thread, sharp as truth. It bleeds through concrete and steel. And it waits, patient, hungry, for the day someone will hold that note and walk freely into sunlight. In ADX Florence, a single piece of paper is a revolution. A message is a heartbeat. And every hidden word is a promise. You will not silence us. The day the walls spoke. There's a myth in ADX Florence. A whispered legend passed through pipes and concrete. The inmates call it the day the walls spoke. It didn't happen in a riot. Not in fire or chaos or blood. It wasn't a breakout. Nobody ran. Nobody screamed. Instead, it happened in the quiet. It happened in the kind of stillness that feels like God is holding his breath. It began with a single tap. Soft, measured, calm. Tap, tap, tap. Like a knock on the world's most heavily guarded door. A pause. Then another tap from far down the tier. Then another. Then more. Different rhythms. Different languages of sound. All merging into one living pulse. A heartbeat made of defiance. No faces. No words. Just the inmates. Every race, every creed, every enemy. Speaking the same forbidden truth. We are still here. Guards froze. Not out of fear of violence. But because silence, the tool the prison used to break men, was suddenly shattered by sound. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just solidarity. A man in cell 218 pressed his hand to the wall. He didn't tap. He felt the taps, vibrations carrying through the bones of the building. Another inmate in range 5 whispered to no one, just to himself. They forgot we were human. Today we reminded them. It lasted less than 2 minutes. No alarms. No sirens. Just a sudden stillness afterward. The kind of calm after a storm, where everyone knows something sacred just happened. And when the guards finally barked commands, no one moved. Because the message wasn't rebellion. It was existence. For 2 minutes, every man in ADX Florence was not alone. 2 minutes where the silence cracked open, just enough for humanity to breathe. 2 minutes where the walls, the same walls meant to bury souls, carried their voices instead of swallowing them. And then, as if nothing happened, the prison returned to dead quiet. Lights buzzed. Cameras hummed. Footsteps resumed. But the silence was different now. Not victorious. Not in control. Shaken. Haunted. Aware. Because the prison had heard something it was never designed to hear. Connection. This story? Maybe it's true. Maybe it's myth. But in places like ADX, myths matter. They become survival. They become proof of spirit in a system built to crush it. The government calls ADX Florence the clean version of hell. The inmates call it a place built for you to forget you're human. And yet, even there, in echoing tombs of concrete and steel, a man will risk punishment to send a tap through a wall, a whisper through a vent, a note through a drain, not to plan escape, not to plot violence, but to say, I exist, you exist, we are still men. Silence is heavy here, but the human spirit, heavier. In the quietest prison in America, where voices are forbidden and isolation is weaponized, the truth still finds a way to breathe. Not loud, not bold, but steady, relentless, alive. Conclusion and CTA, call to action. If this story stayed with you, if you felt the walls close in, if you heard those taps echo in your chest, then you understand something most never will. Solitary doesn't just punish the body, it stars the soul. No matter what these men did, every human deserves a voice. And if the world forgets them, they'll remind each other. In taps, pipes, whispers, and scars. Because silence may surround them, but silence does not own them. If you want more stories like this, real prisons, real minds, Real humanity in the darkest corners. Why did we checkmark subscribe? Why did we checkmark like this video? Why did we checkmark comment? I hear you. To let the algorithm know people still care. And remember, freedom isn't just walking outside. Freedom is being heard.